Steve Harvey had presided over Family Feud for more than 2 decades, navigating thousands of family dynamics and witnessing virtually every conceivable variation of human behavior under the pressure of game show competition. However, nothing in his extensive experience could have prepared him for what would unfold on a bright March afternoon in 2024. The studio audience settled into their seats with anticipation. The familiar upbeat music filled the air, creating an atmosphere of excitement and possibility, and 2 families stood ready to compete in what everyone assumed would be another entertaining episode, featuring the customary mix of laughter and competitive spirit, and perhaps a few memorable incorrect answers that would showcase Steve's legendary comedic reactions. The Anderson family from Colorado faced off against the Chen family from New York, both teams projecting enthusiasm and family solidarity as they took their positions on the brightly lit stage. What began as a seemingly typical family game show would transform into one of the most explosive confrontations in television history, as a husband's inappropriate flirtation with a member of the opposing family would trigger a reaction from his wife so furious and shocking that it would fundamentally challenge assumptions about acceptable behavior, consequences for public disrespect, and the limits of what should be tolerated in the name of maintaining appearances or avoiding conflict. The Anderson family consisted of 5 members who presented themselves as a confident, attractive unit when they first appeared on the Family Feud stage. Leading the team was 38-year-old Ryan Anderson, a real estate developer from Denver who carried himself with the casual arrogance of someone accustomed to using charm and physical attractiveness to navigate professional and social situations. His carefully maintained appearance, expensive casual clothing, and practiced smile communicated someone deeply invested in projecting desirability and appeal. Standing beside him was his wife of 13 years, Jessica Anderson, a 36-year-old woman whose sharp intelligence and controlled demeanor immediately distinguished her from typical game show contestants. Jessica worked as a corporate attorney at a prestigious Denver law firm, a demanding profession requiring strategic thinking, meticulous attention to detail, and the ability to maintain composure under pressure while advocating forcefully for her clients. Their 2 children completed the primary family unit. 11-year-old Sophia stood on the stage with the observant awareness of a child who had learned to read subtle social dynamics and anticipate adult conflicts, while 8-year-old Tyler displayed the typical excitement of a young child appearing on television. Completing the team was Ryan's younger brother, 33-year-old Marcus Anderson, who worked in digital marketing and had agreed to participate despite some private reservations about his brother's tendency toward inappropriate behavior around attractive women. Jessica Anderson had been ambivalent when Ryan insisted they apply to appear on Family Feud. She had expressed concerns about how he would behave on national television, particularly given his pattern of flirtatious behavior with women he found attractive regardless of whether such attention was appropriate or welcomed. Ryan had dismissed her concerns, arguing that appearing on a popular game show would be enjoyable for the children and that Jessica was being oversensitive about his naturally friendly personality. Jessica had reluctantly agreed to submit the application, though she had privately decided that if Ryan engaged in inappropriate behavior during the taping, she would respond in ways that made absolutely clear such conduct was unacceptable regardless of context or audience. For Jessica, this appearance represented a test of whether Ryan could control his impulses and behave appropriately when the stakes included their children witnessing his actions and millions of viewers forming opinions about their marriage and family dynamics. The Chen family consisted of 5 members, including 24-year-old Melissa Chen, a strikingly attractive graduate student studying architecture at Columbia University, whose confidence and intelligence were immediately apparent in her interactions on stage. Melissa's presence seemed to capture Ryan Anderson's attention from the moment both families were introduced, and careful observers noted that his eyes followed her movements with an intensity that suggested more than casual interest in an opposing team member. If you have ever wondered how disrespect can escalate when left unchecked, and how one person's furious refusal to tolerate public humiliation can establish boundaries that challenge everyone present to examine their own complicity in normalizing inappropriate behavior. Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that remind us of the importance of accountability, self-respect, and the courage required to respond forcefully when boundaries are violated in ways that demand immediate and unequivocal consequences. The game began with typical enthusiasm and energy that characterized Family Feud episodes. The Chen family played with genuine warmth and mutual encouragement, celebrating correct answers and supporting one another through inevitable mistakes with grace and good humor. The Anderson family's participation was competent, but marked by undercurrents of tension that became increasingly apparent as the episode progressed. Ryan's attention remained notably focused on Melissa Chen, with his eyes tracking her movements and his body language oriented toward her, even when the game action was occurring elsewhere on the stage. The first indication that serious problems were developing emerged during the second round when both families gathered at the podium for a face-off question. Ryan positioned himself directly across from Melissa, and as Steve prepared to ask the question, Ryan made a comment about how difficult it was to concentrate with such beautiful competition standing so close. The comment was delivered with a smile that suggested he believed it would be received as charming flattery, but Melissa's uncomfortable expression and Jessica's immediate tension communicated that the remark had crossed professional boundaries and created discomfort for everyone who heard it. Steve Harvey's expression registered disapproval of the comment, and he attempted to redirect the energy by proceeding quickly with the game question. However, Ryan's inappropriate behavior continued and escalated throughout subsequent rounds. During the third round, when Melissa stepped up to provide an answer, Ryan made an audible comment about how intelligence and beauty were rarely found together, but that she obviously proved that rule wrong. The remark was ostensibly complimentary, but carried undertones of objectification that made it deeply inappropriate given the context and the fact that Melissa was a stranger who had given no indication she welcomed such attention. Jessica Anderson's face had been growing progressively more set and controlled as she witnessed her husband's behavior, her legal training allowing her to maintain composure while internally processing her rising fury at being publicly humiliated through Ryan's obvious attraction to and pursuit of attention from another woman. Marcus Anderson appeared increasingly uncomfortable with his brother's conduct, at one point attempting to redirect Ryan's focus by asking him a question about game strategy, but Ryan dismissed the intervention and continued directing his attention toward Melissa. The situation reached a critical point during the fifth round when Ryan made a comment that crossed from inappropriate flirtation into behavior that was overtly disrespectful to both Melissa and Jessica. As Melissa returned from the podium after providing a correct answer, Ryan stated loudly enough for the microphones to capture that he should get her number after the show because he clearly needed to spend more time around someone who could teach him about architecture and maybe some other things as well. The comment's suggestive nature combined with the fact that he had made it while standing next to his wife on a family game show created a moment of such profound inappropriate behavior that something fundamental shifted in the atmosphere of the studio. What happened next would shock everyone present and create one of the most talked about moments in Family Feud history. Jessica Anderson turned to face her husband directly, and her response demonstrated that fury channeled through legal training and strategic thinking could be more devastating than any emotional outburst. She addressed Ryan in a voice that was controlled but carried such cold rage that it silenced the entire studio immediately. Jessica stated that she had tolerated his pattern of inappropriate flirtation throughout their marriage because she had convinced herself that maintaining family stability was more important than addressing his disrespectful behavior, but that watching him pursue another woman on national television while standing next to her and their children had finally demonstrated with absolute clarity that he valued his ego gratification more than his marriage or his family's dignity. Jessica continued speaking, her words precise and cutting in the way that only someone trained in legal advocacy could deliver. She explained that Ryan's behavior over the past 30 minutes had provided more than sufficient grounds for her to file for divorce based on emotional cruelty and public humiliation, and that his apparent belief that such conduct was acceptable or charming revealed fundamental character flaws that she could no longer rationalize or excuse. Jessica stated that she was done protecting his reputation, done making excuses for his inappropriate behavior, and done accepting treatment that communicated she was less valuable than whatever attractive woman had temporarily captured his attention. Jessica then did something that shocked everyone present even more than her initial confrontation. She removed her wedding ring, walked over to where Steve Harvey stood watching the confrontation unfold, and handed him the ring with a request that he return it to Ryan after the taping concluded, because she would not be going home with her husband and did not want any symbols of their marriage in her possession. She explained that she had already contacted her law firm's family practice group during a bathroom break earlier in the taping after witnessing Ryan's initial inappropriate comments, and that attorneys would be filing divorce papers within the week based on the pattern of disrespectful behavior she had documented over the years, combined with the public humiliation he had inflicted during the Family Feud appearance. The studio fell into complete silence as Jessica made arrangements with production staff for separate transportation for herself and her children, making it clear she would not be traveling with Ryan under any circumstances. She addressed her children directly, explaining in age-appropriate terms that their father had behaved in ways that were disrespectful and hurtful, and that she was making decisions to protect them from environments where such behavior was normalized or tolerated. Jessica told Sophia and Tyler that they would discuss everything more thoroughly later, but that the most important thing they needed to know was that their mother would always stand up for herself and for them, and that no one deserved to be treated with the kind of disrespect their father had displayed. Steve Harvey stood processing what he had just witnessed, clearly grappling with how to respond to a situation that had escalated far beyond typical family disagreements into territory involving profound marital crisis and immediate family dissolution. He made a decision to address what had occurred rather than simply proceeding as though nothing unusual had happened. Steve spoke directly to Ryan Anderson, and his tone communicated disappointment and condemnation without reservation or diplomatic softening. Steve told Ryan that he had just witnessed his wife demonstrate more strength, clarity, and self-respect than Ryan had shown in his entire performance during the taping. Steve explained that Ryan's behavior had been inappropriate from his first comment about Melissa's appearance, and that his continued escalation despite obvious discomfort from Melissa and visible distress from Jessica revealed someone who prioritized his own ego gratification over basic respect for the women around him and over any consideration for his marriage or children. Steve made clear that Ryan's apparent belief that his flirtation was harmless or flattering demonstrated a fundamental failure to understand consent, appropriate boundaries, and the impact of his actions on people who had not asked for or welcomed his attention. Steve then addressed Melissa Chen directly, apologizing on behalf of the show for subjecting her to unwanted attention and inappropriate comments that had created discomfort during what should have been an enjoyable family experience. He acknowledged that she had handled the situation with grace and composure despite being placed in an awkward position by Ryan's conduct, and he assured her that his behavior was not representative of how guests should be treated on Family Feud or in any other context. Steve spoke to the Anderson children with compassion, explaining that they had witnessed something difficult but that their mother's response was an important lesson about standing up for yourself when someone treats you with disrespect. He emphasized that their father's behavior was his own responsibility and did not reflect on them, and that they should be proud of their mother for refusing to accept treatment that violated her dignity and self-respect. Steve made an announcement regarding how the show would proceed. He stated that given the circumstances, the game would not continue to completion and that neither family would receive prize money. However, he explained that he would personally provide $5,000 to Jessica Anderson to help her with immediate expenses related to the separation and divorce proceedings she was initiating, and that he would ensure she had access to resources and support as she navigated the challenges ahead. The production crew worked quickly to facilitate the Anderson family's departure from the studio, providing separate transportation as Jessica had requested, and ensuring that she and her children were protected from having to interact with Ryan beyond what was absolutely necessary for logistical purposes. Steve Harvey personally spoke with Jessica privately, offering words of support and providing contact information for resources that might be helpful as she moved forward with ending her marriage and rebuilding her life. In the days following the taping, word of what had occurred spread through entertainment media, despite the episode never being scheduled for broadcast. Multiple audience members shared accounts of Jessica's furious reaction to Ryan's flirtation and her decision to immediately initiate divorce proceedings, creating widespread discussion about appropriate responses to public disrespect and the question of whether Jessica's reaction had been justified or disproportionate to the offense. Public response to the incident was divided but predominantly supportive of Jessica's decision to respond forcefully to behavior she found intolerable. Many commentators praised her for refusing to normalize or tolerate Ryan's inappropriate conduct, noting that her immediate and unequivocal response sent powerful messages about self-respect and the importance of establishing consequences for disrespectful behavior. These supporters argued that Ryan's pattern of escalating flirtation, despite obvious discomfort from multiple people, demonstrated someone who would only modify his behavior if faced with severe consequences, and that Jessica's decision to end the marriage provided exactly the kind of accountability that might prevent future similar conduct. Other commentators expressed concern that Jessica's response had been extreme, and that ending a 13-year marriage based on flirtatious comments during a game show taping represented overreaction that would create significant disruption for her children. These critics acknowledged that Ryan's behavior was inappropriate, but questioned whether immediate divorce was a proportionate response, particularly given the public nature of Jessica's confrontation and the permanence of decisions made in moments of fury. Jessica Anderson addressed these varying perspectives in a carefully considered statement released several weeks after the incident. She explained that her decision to pursue divorce had not been based solely on Ryan's behavior during the Family Feud taping, but rather represented a culmination of 13 years of similar inappropriate conduct that she had repeatedly addressed through private conversations that produced temporary changes, but no lasting modification of his fundamental patterns. Jessica stated that the Family Feud incident had simply provided absolute clarity that Ryan would not change his behavior regardless of how many chances she provided or how many conversations they had about boundaries and respect. Jessica discussed her decision to confront Ryan publicly and to remove her wedding ring on camera, acknowledging that these actions had been dramatic, but explaining that they had been strategic choices designed to prevent Ryan from controlling the narrative or minimizing his behavior, as he had done countless times in their private conflicts. She noted that having witnesses to both his inappropriate conduct and her response created documentation that would support her position in divorce proceedings and would make it impossible for Ryan to claim she had overreacted to minor social awkwardness rather than to a pattern of disrespectful behavior. Regarding the impact on her children, Jessica explained that she had made the decision to respond immediately and decisively because she believed that allowing Sophia and Tyler to witness their mother accepting disrespectful treatment would teach them damaging lessons about what they should tolerate in their own future relationships. She stated that while the public nature of the confrontation had created short-term discomfort for her children, she believed that demonstrating self-respect and establishing boundaries would benefit them more in the long term than would modeling acceptance of inappropriate behavior to avoid conflict or disruption. Ryan Anderson released a statement through his attorney several months after the incident, acknowledging that his behavior during the Family Feud taping had been inappropriate and expressing regret for the embarrassment and hurt he had caused Jessica and their children. However, the statement was notably defensive in tone, suggesting that Jessica's response had been disproportionate and that her decision to pursue divorce based on comments he had intended as harmless flirtation reflected her inability to distinguish between innocent social interaction and genuinely problematic behavior. The contrast between Jessica's thoughtful explanation of her decision-making process and Ryan's defensive minimization of his conduct created additional public discussion about accountability and the ways that people who engage in inappropriate behavior often frame consequences for their actions as unreasonable overreactions rather than natural results of their choices. Relationship experts use the Anderson family incident as a teaching example when discussing patterns in which one partner repeatedly violates boundaries while characterizing the other partner's objections as excessive or unreasonable. Steve Harvey spoke about the incident in general terms during subsequent interviews, explaining that he had been shocked by both Ryan's escalating inappropriate behavior and Jessica's decisive response, but that he had come to understand her reaction as the culmination of years of frustration rather than as impulsive overreaction to a single incident. Steve noted that the confrontation had challenged him to think more carefully about the ways that media figures sometimes normalize inappropriate behavior by treating it as harmless entertainment rather than as conduct that causes real discomfort and harm to people who are subjected to unwanted attention. 2 years after the incident, Jessica Anderson had rebuilt her life in ways that reflected her values and priorities. She had advanced in her legal career, taking on partnership responsibilities at her firm and developing expertise in family law cases involving emotional abuse and patterns of disrespectful conduct in marriages. Her relationship with her children had remained strong, with both Sophia and Tyler demonstrating resilience in adapting to their parents' divorce and expressing understanding of why their mother had made the decisions she had made during and after the Family Feud taping. Ryan Anderson had faced professional and social consequences from the incident, with business associates and potential clients expressing concerns about his judgment and behavior based on widely circulated accounts of what had occurred. His relationship with his children had become strained, with both Sophia and Tyler expressing disappointment in his conduct and difficulty trusting his assurances that he understood why his behavior had been problematic. The lasting significance of Jessica Anderson's furious reaction extended beyond the immediate impact on her marriage and family. The incident became referenced in discussions about appropriate responses to public disrespect, the importance of establishing immediate consequences for boundary violations, and the ways that fury channeled strategically can be more effective than emotional outbursts in creating lasting change and accountability. Jessica's decision to respond decisively rather than accepting inappropriate behavior to avoid conflict challenged cultural assumptions about maintaining appearances and demonstrated that protecting dignity sometimes requires actions that create disruption and discomfort. As we reflect on this powerful and controversial story, it serves as a reminder that patterns of disrespectful behavior often escalate when left unchallenged, that public humiliation sometimes requires public response to prevent manipulation of narratives, and that fury expressed through strategic action rather than emotional chaos can establish boundaries and consequences that produce genuine accountability. Jessica Anderson's shocking reaction to her husband's flirtation demonstrated that self-respect sometimes requires immediate and decisive action, even when such action creates permanent changes and challenges comfortable assumptions about proportionate responses to disrespect. If this story has challenged you to think differently about appropriate responses to public disrespect, reminded you of the importance of establishing immediate consequences for boundary violations, or helped you understand the strategic value of fury channeled through decisive action rather than emotional outbursts, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share this story with someone who might benefit from understanding that tolerating inappropriate behavior to avoid conflict often enables escalation, that protecting dignity sometimes requires dramatic action that creates disruption, and that responses others characterize as overreactions may actually represent appropriate accountability for patterns of disrespectful conduct that have been minimized or excused for far too long.